Alrighty, so in this video, we're going to be talking about our first for loop. We're not going to see every single detail about for loops, but we are going to see a couple things that they can do and how they can do some pretty neat looking stuff. So first of all, the idea of a loop is just in coding is something that we start doing, we get to the bottom of that structure, and then it brings us just back up to the top. We've already seen our first introduction to a loop, sort of, with the onStep function, where the onStep function is just an infinite loop, right? It will keep going forever and ever and ever until I exit the program or stop, use like app.stop or something like that. A for loop is a loop that will do the thing where it starts off, you do the stuff inside of the for loop, you get to the bottom, and you jump back up to the top, but it'll do that a specific number of times, and you're going to be the one that gets to specify that. We will get into the details of exactly the nitty-gritty of exactly how for loops work eventually. We'll also talk about while loops eventually. But here's what you need to know for now so that you can start understanding it. To start a for loop, you need to say, all right, I'm saying for, and then you need to have some variable that you start off with. Usually we'll start with I, maybe X, maybe N. X usually is used, though, for like a coordinate. So we like to use I as our counter for whatever reason in programming. So you're going to say for, choose a variable that you're going to be counting on. And for now, for our for loops, we're going to say for I in range. And then inside of that range parentheses, you're going to decide how many times I want to run through that loop. Without getting into too much detail of how range works, this for definition over here is saying I'm going to use I as my variable that I'm going to be moving along throughout this range, and I want to run through this 10 times. This will start a range if you don't say anything, if you don't specify. It will start out at 0 and go up to, but not including that last number. But because we start on 0, it is going to run through it 10 times. So let me run this, because right now, so that's the header of our for loop. It works sort of like a function where you have to have a header and then a colon, and then you have indented stuff, the body of our for loop. That's the stuff inside of it that will run as the for loop is running. And all I'm doing in here is I'm just saying I'm printing the I variable. And what will happen now is I define my for loop. I'm using the I variable. I'm going to do it in a range of 10. I will print out whatever I's current value is. I get to the bottom of my for loop, come back up to the top, check if I'm done, and if I'm not, I iterate, I move to the next value that I is supposed to be, and then I do it again. In this case, I'm starting at 0, running through it 10 times because it's a range of 10, and if I run this, there's nothing on the canvas, but the print function will print out the values of I. So it started at 0, then went to 1, then 2, then 3, then 4. Started at 0, it's going to run through that 10 different times. So starting at 0, I run through 9. I actually counted, I ran through that loop 10 times. Now, that's basically how a for loop works. It's kind of confusing doing it this way, so let's bring some graphics into it. And I'm sorry, CMU CS Academy, I'm going to use basically a very similar example that you used, but I'm not giving away any kind of checkpoints or exercises. So I'm going to start by creating a circle at 20, maybe at 20, yeah, I'll start at 20, 20, 200, and I'll make it a radius of 20, I guess. And so now if I run this, well, I created a circle. Now, if you notice, it looks a little weird, and that's because what I ended up doing is I ended up making 10 circles on top of this circle in this one exact spot. Now, that I we saw before changes. It goes up from 0 through 9 when I use a range of 10. Always starting at 0, always going to 1 before the last number if you just put a single number into your range. So what I can do, and this is kind of cool, is I can say, all right, I'm going to have my circle at coordinate 20, but I can actually, you know what? I can say 20 times I. So now I'm going to say, all right, 20 times, the first time it'll be 0. The second time around, I will be 1. So then it'll be 20 times 1, it'll be 20. And once we do this, in 2 lines of code, I made a bunch of circles over here. I don't really like how that looks. Maybe let's do 40 times I, and a radius of 20 will make it look a little bit more spaced apart. Yeah. So here, with just these 2 lines of code, for I in range 10, and then circle 40 in the x times I, the y and radius are unchanging, it's going to make me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different circles. Now, what I kind of want to do is I'm not going to go too much crazier with the rest of this video in terms of showing you more powers of the for loop. I guess I'll do that in another one. But I want to see exactly what's happening in these 2 lines to really get a better understanding of how this for loop works. So let's move over to a Jamboard. I'm going to go ahead and take a screenshot of this code that we got here, and I'll post it over here. And let's start looking at exactly what's going on over here. So to start, first I'm on line 1. Actually, let me move this over a little bit so I can kind of point at the lines. I start out at line 1. When I first get to that first line, I'm going to be like, oh, I'm creating an I variable. I'm creating an I variable. It's some area in memory that's holding on, some area in my computer that's holding on to the information. And because I just said range 10, didn't say anything else, this is going to default to setting I to 0. Great. Now, I'm trying to create a circle at the coordinates 40 times, well, I is 0. So 40 times 0 and 200. Well, so this is going to create a circle at the coordinates 0, 200. I hope that we're okay seeing how that worked out, right? I was 0 from the start of this because that's just how for I in range 10, it starts out by saying, hey, I'm going to set I to 0. Great. And so then I'm creating a circle at 40 times I, which is 0 right now, 200 with a radius of 20. So it'll have the coordinates 0, 200 the first time around. So let's maybe make a little canvas over here. La, 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 just so we can sketch out what we got. And so we started by creating a circle at the coordinates 0, 200. And because it can't draw off the side of the canvas, boom, we got our first circle over there. Now let's see what happens the next time we run through. Well, let me erase this. I'm going to try to make this 200 look a little bit nicer just because we're going to see that same 200 for a while. The 0 is about to change though too. So let me erase that. Whoop. Make that 0 and the 200 look better. Okay. We got to the bottom of our for loop, the bottom of the body of our for loop. So we passed through it once. And what that means, once I get to the bottom, I'm going to jump back up to the top of the for loop. We'll see in a later video, you can have multiple lines in your for loop, just like you can have multiple lines in a function or in an if statement. So we jump back up to the top. When we get to the top over here, it's going to say, all right, well, I'm going to check if I is still in the range between 0 and the non-inclusive 10 at the top. And if it's still in there, I'm going to increment I. So I was 0 a moment ago. It's my second time through the loop. So I'm going to, or it's just, my next time through the loop, I'm going to increase I's value to 1. I'm going to increase I's value to 1. Well, so now over here, I actually end up multiplying 40 times 1. So I end up going to the coordinates of 40, 200. So this is going to be 2200. 4200 will be right around here. And a radius of 20. The 2 circles are going to go like that. We've made it to the bottom of our for loop again. So we jump back up to the top. Check to see if we still belong to keep going. And if we do, we're going to increment again. So I was just 1. Well, this time I is going to switch over to being 2, which means when I multiply over here, it's not going to be times 1. And when I do the multiplication, it's not going to multiply to make 40. So let's see. I is getting switched over to a 2, which means that over here on line 2, when I do 40 times I, it's really going to replace it with 40 times 2, which is going to come out to putting a circle at 8200. So here I was at 0. This is 40, 20 more, another 20, 8200. We'll make our third circle. And hopefully you're starting to see exactly how this for loop went through. If you're ever struggling and you have an error with your for loop, the only real way to check it out and see what's going on is to work it out. Try going through it every single, one step at a time. at least at the beginning, when your for loops are simple and they're not too many steps. If they start getting, like you're going a range of like 0 to 1,000, then you yourself personally, you're not going to step through 0 to 1,000. There's other debugging strategies that you can use for that. But for now, at least while we're learning how to use for loops, it's a good strategy to just kind of like, all right, let me walk through it one line at a time, see exactly what's happening with my variables, how it's changing the things that I'm creating. And that can be really instructive and really helpful in seeing how your for loop works. Now, this will keep on going, making more and more circles as we go, right? Hopefully you start to see the pattern of how it works until we get to the end of the for loop. It will run 10 times, but I starts at 0 and ends one number before you have in that range limit over there, which is potentially important for kind of understanding how your thing goes. So this will end when my I is at 9. Once my I gets turned to 9, it will still, right? It was 8 before, it just got turned to 9. It will still run through this with I as 9. It will run through it with I as 9. So then 40 times 9 would be 360. So 40 times 9, it would make it a 360. So we made all the other circles here. I don't have enough room to draw the example out. Makes it a 360. And then the last time it goes through, it's going to be like, my I, I'm going to switch over to 10. 10's outside of my range, or it's the end of my range. I'm done. And we can check that also by just looking back over here at the sandbox. And you can see our last one is at 360, right? So hopefully running through, so all we did was just a 2-line for loop, but hopefully this helps you a little bit. If you were looking through, what is it, 7.2 or 7.3 here, if you're looking through that and you weren't sure exactly what was going on, hopefully watching us go through it step by step in video form was kind of valuable. So yeah, until next time.